So while it's important to keep talking about what is happening and probably about to happen in the Middle East, I wanted to zoom out a little bit because we are all getting played, and it's important to remember that. Because when we really get down to it all the way, who's really responsible for all this? Western imperialist powers. And this is a perfect example of what divide and conquer or divide and rule looks like. Because while the rest of us are like fighting and having these knockdown, drag out, like, in fact, some of them are actually great and very overdue conversations that I actually feel kind of good about and think will lead somewhere good. But like while we're doing all of that, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed, Boeing, Raytheon, General Dynamics, their stocks are going up, baby. And the full throated condemnation that is coming from the Western imperialist countries of any potential blowback that is going to happen from their essentially outpost in the Middle East. They are gearing up to have a big war against all of them. Because again, when you keep pushing people, something's going to happen. And when they see what is happening in Gaza, then they're going to be like, what's going to happen to us next, isn't it? And so they're going to want to do something. And then, since we already have laid the ground, and by we, I say we because we are in the imperial core, and it's important not to divorce ourselves from it because our money is going towards creating it. Like, that's just how it is. So what the imperialists do, what the Steve Bannons of the world, keep an eye on Steve Bannon at all times. What's funny to me is that like when Steve Bannon got like kicked out of, out of the cabinet of Trump, people were like, ha ha ha, no, he didn't get kicked. He was done. He was done. He did what he came to do. That man is maybe the most dangerous person on the planet, and people keep letting him slide under the radar, and he keeps going from country to country, radicalizing right-wing leader after right-wing leader, and he's an ideologue. He believes in a great turning, like, a clash of civilizations, and he wants basically white European civilization to come out on top of that. And things like this, things like the conflict in the Middle East, are helping him make that happen. It is insidiously evil in its brilliance, the way that these Western powers decided, like, well, we are anti-Semitic as hell. And so what are we going to do? Let's create a real problem for all of our enemies by putting one group of Semitic people against another, right? Because like Jewish people and Palestinian people are all Semitic people. But by creating that conflict, they took the heat off themselves. And really the problem was that they were so racist that they didn't want to find a way for Jewish people to live happily in the countries that they were in. And we're like, yeah, you know what? Let's give you your own country. And since we don't like any people that are there, let's just give you their country. And I'm going to make a comparison that a lot of y'all are not going to like. The country of Liberia in Africa was created by a group called the American Colonization Society. It was a Western imperialist group that teamed up with some black nationalists and decided, yes, we're going to create a homeland for black people in Africa. But what we're going to do is we're going to displace all the people who are living there to create it. In doing that, they pit black people against each other, essentially, and they didn't like any of us. So they were absolutely happy to have black American people who were culturally American. Okay, say what you want to about going back to Africa. Like that project really shows what happens when you take people who have never been someplace and put them someplace, especially when you give them the money and backing of a Western imperialist country that doesn't like any of them to begin with. The American black people basically ruled over and oppressed and subjugated the indigenous black people in Liberia. And it wasn't until pretty recently that Liberia was actually able to throw off the colonial shackles, even though those shackles were held by people who looked like them, even though they didn't dress like them, and they named the cities after white American presidents. This is also why I have compassion for people who have been propagandized and in a way that is really fucking us up right now. Imagine being told your entire life that this country was the only place that you could go to be safe. And even though you never experienced where you are, the kind of danger that had been experienced by your ancestors, people before you, you were taught it so deeply that it feels visceral to you. And that's not your fault. Now, who is up and stuck for is the motherfuckers who do go there and settle, take people's homes forcibly, who basically do what like gentrifiers do here and like go into an area, then call the cops on the people who live in that area and inflict violence on them until those people are displaced. But again, even in the case of gentrification, I do not take issue with people who are trying to live somewhere that they can afford. I take issue with people who are moving into a place to take over and change the culture because they don't like the people who are there. But those of us who have already done a lot of deconstructing of the ways that we were propagandized by these same powers, like we do need to pump the brakes a little bit because a lot of people who have never discovered the news sources or the teachers or the friends or whatever it was that we had that got us to be able to break our programming, the programming we were supposed to have, that's just happening for a lot of people right now. And they need us to help pull them. Because the people who have made their choice about which side they stand on, it's becoming clearer and clearer. And it's going to become even more so over the days that come because more of this is going to unfold. And if we play into the this side versus that side idea, which don't get me wrong, again, it's free Palestine all day. Like, don't get me wrong. But if in talking to people who live in Israel or people who are American and Jewish, we don't acknowledge the fact that like they have been since birth being told this one thing and never got to see on the news the other truths that are now for the first time being shown to them. Like a lot of people, when you try to break them of their programming, and that goes for Black people with Christianity too, like their first reaction is that you are attacking them personally. For those of you who are a little bit more woo or whatever and into astrology and things like that, Jessica Lanyadoo is a buddy of mine and has some great ideas about how visceral a lot of this like Plutonian deep energy is and how certain things, when they're so deep in you, it feels like you are being attacked, like your personal safety is like imminently in danger, even though it's just because of the way you have been educated. But the point is, it's the same as it always has been. Even during the colonization of America, what they would do is they would send in settlers and put them next to people who had been displaced who were angry at them. And then there would be violence. And then the settlers would be like, look at how vicious these people are, right? Not thinking that they, the poor people, were put in that position by some rich imperialists so that they would bear the brunt and then be used to call in, basically rain down hell on the people who they wanted to get rid of anyway. It's a really familiar story. So all this to say, I know that we are feeling a lot and we are having conversations we've maybe never had before and we really should have. But we have to keep our eyes on the prize and remember that if we just let them keep doing this the way that they want to do it, if we let this play out with us all at each other's throats and not looking at the people who are still looting the store, who are still letting the climate change destroy us all, who are still promoting every kind of bad idea that's going to get us to keep hating each other and get us to destroy our own world, the only world that we ever will have. If we don't keep our eyes on them, they're just going to keep accelerating this. Like I said in the previous video, war would be a great way to accelerate not only climate change, but the spread of C-19, which is still out there and spunky. Don't get got, or stay woke, whichever you prefer. It means the same thing.